All of us, every day, face multiple situations in which we have to decide between conflicting choices. And some of them are of little significance, but some are of great importance. And in those areas, I think we need to do two things. We need to first and always trust in God. And secondly, to follow as best as we can determine what He has planned for us. Our readings today, I think, show us this on this last Sunday of Advent. The church brings us two different figures in two different times in salvation history, Ahaz and Joseph. Our first reading takes us to Ahaz. It's around the year 725 BC. Ahaz is the king of the southern kingdom. He's of the line of David, the great king through whom the Messiah has been promised. And he finds himself in a very difficult situation. The southern kingdom is being threatened by invading armies. Isaiah, who is his counselor in the verses immediately preceding our passage, has instructed Ahaz not to fear, to remain firm in faith, not to seek compromise with the invading armies, but to trust in the Lord's deliverance. And then we hear in our passage the words of the Lord through Isaiah to ask for a sign from the Lord. In other words, to seek confirmation of this promise of security that the prophet gives. But Ahaz refuses. He decides against what Isaiah has told him to do. Then Isaiah proclaims that great line, proclaiming the image of God's patience that is tried sometimes with us. Listen, O house of David, it is not enough for you to weary people. Must you also weary my God? And so Isaiah then makes this pronouncement of this sign of ultimate deliverance, that the virgin will conceive and bear a son and shall name him Emmanuel. Now let's move those 725 years later, and we see another man in the line of David. He's not a king, he's just a carpenter. But he finds himself in a precarious situation. It's not concerning those things of kings and nations, but on a personal scale, it is of the greatest importance. He is in love with a young woman. He is engaged to be married to her. She has become pregnant. And we can just imagine the tenderness and the compassion in which Mary told Joseph of the seemingly unimaginable truth that she was pregnant by the power of God. Certainly Joseph would have been tempted to respond with doubt, maybe even anger or upset. Yet he knows this promise of Isaiah. And so as Isaiah delivered that message of the Lord to Ahaz, which was refused, the angel now delivers another message to Joseph. And here's the dramatic difference, the defining characteristic, how each chooses. Ahaz has disregarded the insight of the prophet. Joseph hears the message of the angel and he obeys. He did as the angel of the Lord had commanded him and took his wife into his home. Looking at these two men, we see how you and I are then meant to address those difficult and conflicting choices that we will face. God says to us always what he said through the angel to Joseph: do not be afraid. God is always with you. He came among us 2,000 years ago, and he remains with us in every instance of our lives to sustain us by the power of his grace and his strength and his peace. St. Paul in our second reading shows what the coming of the Son of God in power has done for us. He writes, we have received the grace of adoption, the grace of apostleship, to bring about the obedience of faith. That same obedience that Joseph so wonderfully shows to us. So the readings today bring us these two figures in history and identify different ways in which we can respond sometimes to God's call in our life. And basically the choice is between following sometimes our own voice that's filled with fear or uncertainty, or the voice of the world or of the culture, which so dramatically ignores and repudiates God's truth. Or we can follow what our faith teaches us, which is meant to then bring us to a deeper communion in Christ and in his perfect plan for us. Will we, like Ahaz, doubt and refuse? Or will we, like Joseph, simply obey and trust? Looking at it that way, it's kind of an easy choice to make, isn't it?